and back again on the Dreamcasting Gaming Podcast. Today will be the first solo episode with just myself, and with that being said, this first episode is gonna be based on a topic called gender choices in games. Now, for some, particularly now, you will hear things with regards to gender choices and just gender in general is a sensitive topic. But for myself, I'm more than happy to speak on gender choices in games and why I have and continue to actually choose a gender other than my own. So for it to make any kind of sense, or to take it back to somewhere where I was quite aware that, hold on a minute, I'm consciously making a choice in a game where I'm choosing a gender that initially I didn't even want to do. So I'll take you back to the year 2007. And there was an expansion release for quite a popular game known as World of Warcraft. And the name of this expansion was The Burning Crusade. And they were about to release this expansion which introduced a new race on the faction known as the Horde. So within this game you have two factions at the time, the Horde and the Alliance. And I was playing the Horde, so I was quite excited about that. And this new race that was coming, I was like, oh wow, new race known as the Blood Elves, who were to counter the Night Elves, which were a race on the Alliance. So with that being said, the expansion launched. I went to create this male Blood Elf, and to my disappointment, this male Blood Elf was quite androgynous. Well, not even quite, full androgynous male. Well, that makes any sense. But for those of you listening, what does it mean androgynous? Well, it's when it seems someone could either be perceived as a male or a female. So their traits are they kind of like can go either way in their look. However, the female Blood Elf, there was no androgynous theme there at all. It was clearly a female. But also remember, within this topic we're talking about, this is back in 2007. So times were quite different. You really only had two established genders at that time, which is quite different to present day, where you have more than two. And like as I'm saying, I initially wanted to use a male, and it just wasn't working. I was like, nah, this isn't what I had visualized. So I decided to play a female. So I made a female Blood Elf, and the first thing that got my attention were how good the animations were, and was very fitting, and that was fine. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. That works. I'm sort of enjoying that. But take in mind that this is an MMO. So for those of you wondering what an MMO is, it's a massive multiplayer online game. So there's many other people playing the game at the same time as yourself. So I've played this female, and again, must be aware. Always keep this close to your memory. This is 2007, so this is long before you had things like what's the word? What am I thinking of? So I'm lost for some of the words now, but things like catfishing, people pretending to be what they're not. And I full stop, that was not my intention at all. So I've been playing this female, this female winner. And you know what, guys, do you listening? Do forgive me, this is my first solo, so I'm a little bit out of sync, but I'm sure I'll get better at this. So I'm playing this female class, or female race, shall I say, and everything's fine, but then the reaction around me is kind of different. So it's being assumed that I'm a female when I'm partying up in a group, or I'm doing certain things. So let's say, for instance, I don't know, we're doing a quest together, and there's usually 5 within a party doing a quest or a dungeon. And let's say I might make a mistake, or someone might refer to me as, oh yeah, leave her alone, or why don't you ask the girl to do it, or stuff like that. And I'm like, wow, wait a minute, I wanted these guys, I didn't realize it's not actually a female. It's not actually a female behind the character in this game right now. But that was in experiencing that I did realize there definitely at the time was a different treatment to what I guess a majority of the player base would be sitting back thinking, oh, we're actually playing with a female, and that wasn't the case. But that's an instance of myself making a gender choice that I wouldn't usually do. And after doing it in World of Warcraft, so that was the first time where I had a choice and I made a choice. And that was to play the opposite gender of what you are in, let's say, in a non-fantasy setting. And before that, you would have had games where there would be a female lead. So let's say, for instance, Lara Croft in the Tomb Raider series. Even if you go to things like Street Fighter, you had your Chun-Li's, you had your Cammy, and in Mortal Kombat it was the same. You had your Melinas and your Shivas and Jades and all of those, and those were female characters, but it wasn't really the same because I don't know how do you make it? Well, usually it's a beat 'em up, so you choose a character, but it was also an element of, how would I put it? If you're trying to, let's say for instance, if you're playing someone else and you use Chun-Li, back in I'd say before Street Fighter 4, I think 1, 2, and 3, if you were able to beat, let's say, one of the more main characters like a Ryu or a Ken with Chun-Li, it was always seen as, oh my gosh, you lost to Chun-Li. She's a female character, you shouldn't really lose to her. But that was some ignorance in that scenario. But I think I went off just there. So I go back to the gender choice and what happened after. So again, I've made this choice. I'm using this character. It's a female, and as I'm playing, and I'm playing some more, I'm starting to realize, whoa, I'm definitely getting treated different, in good ways and bad ways. So in some ways, I was able to get away with a lot more mistakes than I would if I was playing as a usual male. But also, there was sometimes an element of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Perhaps being like perhaps being cuddled in the sense that, oh, you know what, just cradle them because it's a female character, she probably doesn't know what she's doing, or something like that. So I definitely was experiencing the opposite side of what was good and what was bad, and I was like, damn, these lot don't even realize. But then there comes some so that was then, so that's 2007, and that went on for some time. But nowadays, I think people they won't assume anymore that just because someone's a female avatar, that it's a female behind it, or even sometimes a male avatar is a male behind it. And it opened my eyes in playing a female, that it's playing a female in a game where you got a choice can sometimes be better. Because before that point, I would never have even entertained the idea. I was just like, man, I'm just going to play someone or make a character that somewhat either represents how I look or what I may think and such and such. But in that happening in the Burning Crusade, it had definitely changed my view on the gender choice in the game. So as I said, that was that experience there. And I think I fast forward because that could be 2007. It could be the same year that Mass Effect had released, or maybe the year before. Or actually, it couldn't be. Probably around the same time or the year afterwards. And within Mass Effect, that's an RPG setting where you get to choose either a male or a female. Now, I've only ever played the game as a male, but I had been had been told by many people who played the game that, hey, look, you know what? If you play as the female, it's quite a different experience in terms of I think some dialogue choices and just a perspective of a female leading the story and leading the group. So that was a thing which quite a few people had enjoyed. I mean, as I said, I'm yet to experience playing as femship, but that was the beginning of the first time I'd ever made the choice to play another gender in a game where you can choose. So obviously you have a whole load of games where the gender choices are non-existent. You have your main character and that's it. And it's been cool both ways. You've had your leads in the Resident Evil series, from Claire Redfield to Jill Valentine, and even if you go back to Resident Evil 1, I think I remember it was either you played Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine. And a lot of the time, people wouldn't play the Jill Valentine. They would play Chris Redfield, and I say people, the male player base, until they learned that, well, you know what, when you play the Jill, it's going to be quite a different path as to when you play Chris. And again, I think sometimes it's just somewhat ignorance to a degree, like, because I'm going to get to the part where you'll definitely have a section of people, probably not as much now, but back then it was automatically that you would be met with insults if you dared to play a gender that you're not. Why are you doing that? It's weird, or this, that, and the other. But most times out of 10, it's not. It's a choice within the fantasy setting. But as I said, you've had many games where gender is eliminated, but the time when it did present itself and I went to choose a gender I initially wouldn't have, it was within this game. But since then, as I was saying, after having such a good experience doing that, it opened my eyes that I might actually make more characters that are females, because of the visual attention, not just to how obviously a female will look, but also into their animations. By animations, I just mean how they use certain things. So one thing that threw me off with the male Blood Elf, he always looked like he was unable to uphold the weapons that he had. So he's half holding them halfway off the floor. He looks like he's struggling, and it's like, why is he looking so like weak? Just like he can't do anything. And the female version looked more than capable. If anything, looked like she excelled in any weapon that she had. She looked like she was obviously some kind of grandmaster in using that weapon, and that was quite a thing. But understand this: we've had characters in games who appear androgynous, and one that stands out the most to me is Vega from a Street Fighter, and I believe his name may be different actually in other parts of the. If you're not playing the PAL version, if my memory serves me well. But anyway, Vega, the guy from Spain, with one hand he's got claws on, and he protects his face with a mask. Now he was quite, some would say narcissistic, but androgynous, because if you look at Vega with the naked eye, with the long hair and the slender sort of tone in the distance, you wouldn't be so sure what gender he is. But that was, I think that's a good example of androgynous. But at the same time, Vega was quite vicious either way, and I think was handled very well aesthetically as a character in Street Fighter, by the way. So from the Burning Crusade, we've had other games. I think even in I'll fast forward because I can't remember any in between. Burning Crusade and Diablo 3. So not Diablo 4, but Diablo 3. And I remember making a female barbarian. And that was quite off because it was like, well, a female barbarian. But it just reminded me of the idea of Red Sonja. If any of you have ever seen that, she was like a female counterpart to Conan the Barbarian. And it really opened my eyes to like, you know what, the female gender within gaming, when you got a choice, can actually be pretty good if you are someone who's exclusively only played male and doesn't realize. So that's just me speaking from my perspective as a male who used to actually do that up until that point. And you may ask, oh yeah, but what games was there? Well, there was Knights of the Old Republic, where that was a very famous RPG, where I just made a male version of a character, and that was it. Didn't even think. It's like you put the game on, you'll see choice, male or female. You just click in male. That's it. End of story. Nothing more to be said. But that was what turned me into paying more attention into female avatars. Now, as I said, you're obviously going to have excuse the background noise as well in this episode here. You may have heard quite a bit. But you know, as I was saying, you'll have pockets of people who will consider it to be weirdo stuff, or why the hell would you do that? And they probably haven't really paid attention or heard an explanation. But some of the more popular ones is some people, and I've only really seen this from males, they like, if they're going to look at a character all day, they'd rather it was a female character they looked at all day. So I guess it makes some kind of sense for someone, for a male, if you're that bothered. And for others, some people just want to make a character that looks a lot like themselves, put into that fantasy setting. And also it helps them kind of put themselves in the situation and think, okay, what would I do here? You know, that's me. I've made Avatar me, but what would I do? And if you play a female, sometimes you're like, well, if I'm instructing this female, what would I have her do? You know, what would I have her not do? And vice versa. If you're a female and you're like, well, you know, I'm made an avatar that's a male. What do I think that male would do presented in that situation? So, yeah, I think, that's pretty much, I think at this point, it brings me sort of like close to the end of my experience and my thoughts on gender choices in games. I will say though, with modern day now, what they've done, what a lot of games have done, they don't really present you with the multiple of gender choices. It's simply been put into two brackets: gender type A and gender type B. And I guess it's basically in a form of how they aesthetically look. So you will have gender type A, which usually may represent what a male would probably look like, but it doesn't say male. And then you have gender type B, or it doesn't even say gender, it just says type B. And that would usually show the physicalities of what's perceived to be a female. So that could be breasts, hips, height, even sometimes, size of shoulders. And then people make their choices based around that. I think Cyberpunk is one game that may have gone into that a bit deeper. I up to now, I still haven't played Cyberpunk. But I'm more than aware that it has an expansion coming up, I believe in September. So that will be my opportunity to play the game and get well versed in what happened in that area of choices. But yeah, so like I said, this is the first time I've done a solo. I did try to get this done months ago, but for whatever reason, it just kept clashing with other episodes and whatnot. So I decided to do a solo. Those of you who've listened this far, it's not very long. If you are interested in hearing more solos from myself or anybody else within the podcast, do send a message on any of the platforms that you're aware of. So Instagram or the emails, any of those is fine. And the Instagram is the podcast name. So the Dreamcasting Gaming Podcast you can find on there, and I believe the link to the email should be there. And very very unprepared of me. I don't even have the email prepared to just call it out right now. So you'll have to actually let me see if I can actually see this. I'm just testing something right now. Aha, so there we go. I've gone and got the email. So for those of you listening, the email is dreamcastinguk@gmail.com. So if you wish to send a message or a request, just make it there. And I'll say it again, dreamcastinguk@gmail.com. And the Instagram page is dreamcasting_gaming_podcast. Okay, so anything you want to suggest or anything you want to know, you can do it there. And honest opinions on this episode. As I said, it's the first time, so I'm not looking for any forgiveness for any mishaps during the episode, but understand that. And that will be it for this solo episode until the next time. So I'm going to depart now, and till the next time, hope you enjoyed the episode, and I should be back in a full episode very soon.